When I called to ask my daughter about her wedding, the biggest day of her life, she told me it had already happened. "We only invited people who really matter, Mom," she said, her voice 1,000 miles away, chilled with the indifference of a stranger. "Just send the lake cabin keys and stop being so dramatic." The world tilted on its axis, the familiar ground beneath my feet, giving way to a terrifying abyss. My only child, my best friend, the little girl whose scraped knees I had kissed and whose broken heart I had mended, had gotten married without me. And in the same breath, she was demanding the keys to our family's most sacred place for her honeymoon. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just smiled a smile that didn't reach my eyes, hung up the phone and began to plan. 3 days later, I left a wedding gift on her doorstep that made her new husband scream for the police. If you're watching this, I'm so glad you're here. Before I unravel this whole twisted story, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I'd love for you to let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It helps me feel a little less alone in all this. Because this story didn't start with that hateful phone call. It started 2 years ago, back when I was still naive enough to believe my world was safe. My name is Eleanor, I'm 65, a retired nurse, and up until recently, I believed my daughter Amelia and I had a bond forged in steel. After my husband, my dear David, was stolen from us by a sudden heart attack 10 years ago, Amelia and I clung to each other. She was 28, a brilliant and fiercely independent marketing director, but she was still my little girl. We were a team. Our days were punctuated by her lunchtime calls, our conversations a comfortable, rambling river of office politics, critiques of the latest Netflix series, and her often hilarious tales of dating disasters in the city. Our sanctuary, the heart of our little family of 2, was the lake cabin. Nestled on the shore of Lake Wallenpaupack in the Poconos, the small A-frame had been in my family for 3 generations. It wasn't grand or luxurious. It smelled perpetually of pine needles, old books, and the faint sweet scent of wood smoke from the stone fireplace. It was where I taught Amelia to swim, her tiny hands clutching my neck in joyful fear. It was where we'd sit for hours on the faded porch swing, watching the sunset paint the water in strokes of orange and purple, talking about her dreams for the future. She always said, ever since she was 12, that she'd get married right there on the dock barefoot, with hundreds of tiny fairy lights strung between the birch trees. That image was etched in my heart. The cabin wasn't just a piece of property. It was a living album of our happiest memories. I thought nothing and no one could ever tarnish that, could ever come between the love Amelia and I shared. I was so proud of the woman she had become, so confident in our connection. But I was wrong. Something could come between us. And his name was Liam. He entered her life wearing a tailor-made suit and a dazzling smile, but underneath he was pure poison. He saw our love not as something to be cherished, but as an obstacle to be dismantled. And I, blinded by my daughter's happiness, stood by and let him do it. That was the mistake that would cost us 2 years of our lives and nearly everything we held dear. The first time Amelia brought Liam home, I had already decided to love him. How could I not? For weeks, my daughter had been floating on a cloud, her voice on our daily calls sparkling with a kind of joy I hadn't heard in years. "He's different, Mom," she'd said, and I could practically hear her blushing through the phone. "He's brilliant and funny and he actually listens. He just gets me." After a string of uninspired boyfriends who seemed more interested in their phones than in my brilliant daughter, Liam sounded like the answer to a prayer I didn't even know I'd been praying. To celebrate, I spent the afternoon making my famous chicken pot pie. It was David's favorite, a recipe passed down from my own mother, full of creamy gravy and tender vegetables under a flaky golden crust. It was more than just food. It was love in a dish, and I wanted to welcome him into our family with the best I had to offer. He arrived at precisely 7 o'clock, not a minute late. He was even more handsome than his pictures suggested, with dark hair, startlingly blue eyes, and a smile that seemed to have been custom designed to disarm mothers. He handed me a bouquet of my favorite flowers, stargazer lilies, their perfume instantly filling the entryway. "Amelia told me you loved these," he said, his voice a smooth, confident baritone. He then complimented the sad-looking rose bushes in my front yard, which were my constant gardening failure, somehow making me feel like a master horticulturist. Dinner was a masterclass in charm. He didn't just ask about my career as an ER nurse. He asked about the emotional toll, the most memorable cases, the changes I'd seen in healthcare over 3 decades. He listened with an intensity that felt almost hypnotic, his eyes never leaving my face. He praised the pot pie as if it were a Michelin-starred creation. He laughed at my old tired jokes. When dinner was over, he insisted on helping clear the table and then launched into a playful, charming debate with me over who would be allowed to wash the dishes. He was, in every conceivable way, perfect. And that's what bothered me. Felt like a performance. Every compliment, every thoughtful question, every charming gesture felt as though it had been rehearsed in front of a mirror. It was the flawless performance of a man who had studied his audience and knew exactly what they wanted to hear. The first real crack in his perfect facade appeared when he brought up the lake cabin. "Amelia's descriptions of your family cabin in the Poconos are just magical," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "A place like that, with lake frontage on Wallenpaupack, the property value must have gone through the roof." My smile tightened a fraction of an inch. I murmured something about sentimental value, but he pressed on. "Have you ever considered renting it out? The income on a place like that during the summer season would be incredible." It was an odd, slightly jarring question to ask a woman he'd just met. A question about monetizing her family's heart and soul. He brought it up one more time before the night was over. A casual but calculated comment about the cost of waterfront property taxes. As they were leaving, he wrapped me in a warm hug. "Eleanor, it was a true pleasure. You have raised an absolutely incredible woman," he said, his voice sincere. But as I watched him open the door of his sleek, black BMW for Amelia, I saw something else. It was the way his eyes scanned the modest but well-kept houses on my quiet suburban street. A faint, almost imperceptible curl to his lip. It was a look of faint disdain. And I couldn't shake the cold, unsettling feeling that this perfect gentleman hadn't been meeting his girlfriend's mother. He had been conducting an appraisal. The foundation of our relationship, built over 28 years of shared laughter and tears, didn't crumble overnight. It was more like a slow, deliberate erosion, a steady campaign waged by an expert strategist. The daily phone calls were the first territory to be ceded. For a week or two, Amelia would still call, but the calls became shorter, more rushed. I could often hear Liam's voice in the background, a low murmur, and Amelia would suddenly say, "Hey mom, gotta go. Liam and I are about to start a movie." Then came the text. The calls stopped, replaced by sporadic, low-effort text messages. "Hope you're having a good day." Or "Sorry, crazy busy. Talk soon." Soon became a relative term stretching from days into a week, and then longer. When I tried to call her, it would often go to voicemail. I tried to tell myself it was normal. This was what happened when your child fell deeply in love. They built a new life, a new world for two. I was supposed to be happy for her, to gracefully step back. But this didn't feel like stepping back. It felt like being pushed off a cliff. The few times we did speak, her language began to change. It was peppered with phrases I'd never heard from her before. Phrases that sounded alien in her mouth but had Liam's fingerprints all over them. When I expressed my concern that we were drifting apart, she responded with a line that sounded like it came straight from a pop psychology textbook. "Mom, Liam and I are working on establishing healthy boundaries," she said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. "He's shown me some articles about enmeshment in families. It's important for us as a couple to define our own unit. Enmeshment, codependence, boundaries." These were his words, his weapons, and he was teaching her how to use them against me. He was recasting our love as a liability. I tried to fight back, to reclaim my daughter. I invited them over for her birthday. "Oh, we can't, Mom," she said a little too quickly. "Liam's already planned a surprise weekend getaway for me. He's so thoughtful." I suggested we meet for our traditional mother-daughter Christmas shopping day. Liam thinks we should focus on making our own traditions this year. Every attempt I made to connect was blocked, deflected by a wall of excuses that always began and ended with Liam. I once drove to her apartment on a whim, bringing a container of her favorite homemade soup because she'd mentioned in a text that she had a cold. She opened the door just a crack, not inviting me in. Liam was visible over her shoulder, lounging on the couch, a smug look on his face. "Now's not a good time, Mom," she'd said, her eyes avoiding mine. We're in the middle of something. She took the soup, said a quick thank you, and closed the door in my face. I walked back to my car, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. The soup felt like a pathetic peace offering that had been rejected. I wasn't just losing my daughter to a man. I was losing her to an ideology, a poisonous doctrine he was feeding her day by day. He was convincing her that in order to love him properly, she had to unlove me, piece by painful piece. I felt like I was watching my own daughter being brainwashed, and I was utterly powerless to stop it. What I didn't know was how far he was willing to go to ensure no one else could reach her either. If Amelia was my sun, her best friend Sarah was the moon. A constant, steady presence in her life since their first day of college. Their friendship was a thing of beauty. A loud, loving, fiercely loyal bond that had survived boyfriends, cross-country moves, and career changes. Sarah was the sister Amelia never had. And to Liam, that made her threat number one. His initial attacks were subtle, like a slow-acting poison. After Amelia and Sarah would have their weekly wine night, Liam would plant his seeds of doubt. She seems to talk about herself a lot, doesn't she? He'd muse. I just worry that she's not as supportive of your success as she should be. There's a hint of jealousy there, don't you think? He was a master at framing his criticisms as concern, a tactic that made his venom all the more effective. The final brutal severing of that bond happened on a cold Tuesday in November. A frantic Sarah called me, her voice shaking. "Eleanor, I'm so worried," she said. "Amelia's canceled on me 3 times in a row and she sounds off. I'm going over there. I don't care if she's busy, I need to see her." An hour later, Sarah called me back. This time sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. She had walked into an ambush. When Amelia opened the door to her apartment, her face was pale and tear-streaked. Behind her stood Liam, his arms crossed, a look of thunder on his face. He was in the middle of yelling at her, something about an expensive dress she'd bought for a work event. He was calling her irresponsible and financially reckless. The moment Liam saw Sarah, his entire demeanor shifted. The snarling rage was instantly replaced by that dazzling fake smile. "Sarah! Hey! So good to see you!" he boomed, wrapping an arm around Amelia's shoulders in a gesture that looked more like ownership than affection. "You just caught us having a boring old budget meeting. This one here needs a tight leash on her credit card." He laughed, a loud artificial sound that didn't reach his cold eyes. But Sarah wasn't fooled. She saw the way Amelia flinched under his touch. She saw the terror that my daughter was trying so desperately to hide. After Sarah made a hasty retreat, Liam executed his final move. He sat Amelia down and wove a masterful, despicable lie. He told her he had overheard Sarah in the hallway talking on her phone. He claimed Sarah had been bad-mouthing him, calling him a controlling psycho, and telling someone that she needed to get Amelia out before he ruined her life. He twisted Sarah's genuine, terrified concern into a jealous, backstabbing plot to break them up. And Amelia, my poor lost daughter, bought every word. She was so deep in his thrall that his version of reality had become her own. 2 days later, she sent Sarah a text message. A single brutal paragraph that ended a decade of unwavering friendship. It accused Sarah of being a toxic, jealous person, and said she never wanted to see or speak to her again. "If you were me in that moment, what would you have done? Would you have called your daughter and screamed the truth at her, risking her cutting you off forever? Or would you have held your tongue, praying for a crack in his armor? Let me know in the comments below." I felt like I was watching a boa constrictor slowly squeeze the life out of my child. And every time I tried to intervene, the snake just squeezed tighter. The announcement came, as so many of life's body blows do in this modern age, via social media. I was sitting at my kitchen table on a gray Saturday morning, nursing a cup of coffee and scrolling mindlessly through my Facebook feed. And then there it was. It was a professionally shot photo, a close-up of Amelia's hand held in Liam's. On her ring finger sat a diamond so enormous it looked vulgar. A gaudy boulder that screamed of money, not love. The caption, written in a bubbly, breathless tone that sounded nothing like my daughter, read, "Future Mrs. Webster. I can't wait to start our forever with my soulmate. Hashtag I said yes, hashtag he put at hashtag engaged." The ceramic mug slipped from my fingers, shattering on the tile floor. My own heartbeat roared in my ears, drowning out the world. Underneath the photo, a waterfall of comments was already pouring in. "OMG. Congrats. That ring is insane. So happy for you too. Friends, coworkers, even my own nieces and nephews were celebrating a monumental piece of family news that they had learned before I had. I wasn't just out of the loop. I was on a different planet. With trembling hands, I dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice a high-pitched squeal of forced excitement. Mom! Oh my God, I was just about to call you, I swear! She said, the lie so blatant it was almost insulting. It just happened last night. It was a total surprise. Liam took me out, and then our friends were there, and then he got down on one knee, and then we went back to his place and called his parents, and it just got so late. The excuses tumbled out, a frantic pre-packaged narrative designed to placate me. I swallowed the bitterness in my throat. Congratulations, honey, I managed to say, my voice sounding thin and reedy to my own ears. That's wonderful news. Isn't it? She gushed. And his parents are just the best. They're already planning an engagement party for us. Next Saturday at their country club. Can you believe it? So fast. A tiny foolish flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Party. A chance to see her, to be included, to stand by her side. That sounds lovely, sweetheart. I'll clear my calendar. Should I drive down Friday night to help with anything? The silence on the other end of the line was a physical thing, a heavy, suffocating blanket. Mom, she finally said, her voice dropping into a cautious, carefully rehearsed tone. About the party. It's more of a thing for Liam's family. His mother is very traditional, you see. She has this whole vision for it, and it's really just for their side of the family and a few of our couple friends to welcome me into the Webster clan. The flicker of hope died, leaving behind a cold, black ash. So I'm not invited, I stated, the words flat and devoid of emotion. It's not like that, she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. It's just, Liam thinks it's important that we honor his family's traditions. We'll do something to celebrate with you soon, I promise. Just the three of us. I knew it was another empty promise. As I hung up the phone, I looked at the shattered mug on my floor. It felt like a perfect metaphor for my relationship with my daughter. Broken into a million pieces, and I had no idea how to even begin to put it back together. A week later, my Facebook feed was filled with pictures of the lavish party. There was Amelia, radiant in a white dress, standing between Liam's parents, his mother's hand possessively on her arm. I had been officially replaced. After the engagement, a new phase of Liam's plan began to unfold. He had successfully isolated Amelia emotionally. Now it was time to start liquidating her financially. The opening salvo came about 6 months later, in a phone call where Amelia's voice was pitched with a frantic, desperate excitement. Mom, you are not going to believe the incredible opportunity that's come up, she started, speaking so quickly the words tripped over each other. Liam has been working on a new business venture in secret. It's a tech startup, a revolutionary new app for personal finance management. It uses AI, Mom. It's going to change everything. A cold dread, now a familiar companion, washed over me. I remained silent, knowing my role was simply to listen to the sales pitch. He's been talking to venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, she continued. But he wants to keep a controlling interest. He's decided to offer a few friends and family spots in the initial seed funding round. And Mom, he's offered one to me. A chance to be a founding investor. My heart felt like a lead weight in my chest. Amelia, honey, that sounds ambitious, I said carefully. Have you seen a business plan? Have you met the other investors? What kind of legal structure does the company have? The exasperated sigh I received was a punch to the gut. Oh my God, Mom, stop interrogating me. This is why I can't talk to you about these things. You're always so negative. Of course he has a business plan. He's brilliant. You just refuse to see it because you've decided you don't like him. Then came the part one had been dreading. I'm going to invest $20,000, she said, her voice defiant. From the inheritance fund Dad left me. $20,000. That money was her security. It was the final gift from her father, a tangible piece of his love and foresight, meant to give her a down payment on a house or a cushion in hard times. Now it was about to be fed into a fantasy app cooked up by a man I was convinced was a sociopath. I tried to reason with her, my voice pleading. Sweetheart, please. I'm begging you. Just talk to a financial advisor before you do anything. Don't just hand over that kind of money without any due diligence. Your father would want you to be careful. Using her father against her was a low blow, and I knew it, but I was desperate. Her reaction was explosive. "Don't you dare bring Dad into this," she screamed, her voice cracking with a rage I had never heard from her. "Dad would have been proud of me for taking a risk, for believing in my partner. You're the one who's scared of everything. Liam was right about you. He said you would try to sabotage this, that you can't stand to see me being a successful, powerful woman making my own financial decisions." The call ended with her slamming the phone down, or at least the digital equivalent. I was left in a stunned, ringing silence. He had twisted my genuine concern into an attack on her independence. He had armed her with prepackaged insults and turned her against me so effectively that she was now willing to risk her financial future just to prove me wrong. 2 weeks later, I gently asked her how her investment was doing. She mumbled something about beta testing and non-disclosure agreements before abruptly changing the subject. I knew, with the kind of soul-deep certainty that only a mother can have, that the $20,000 was gone forever. And with it, another huge piece of my daughter. The day it all finally broke was a perfect Wednesday in early June. The sky was a flawless, cloudless blue, and I was in my garden, humming to myself as I pruned my prize-winning roses. The simple, repetitive motion was a balm to my frayed nerves. For a few hours I could almost pretend that everything was okay, that my daughter still loved me, that her life hadn't been hijacked by a charismatic monster. Then my phone, sitting on the garden bench beside me, buzzed. Her name flashed on the screen. My heart did a familiar, painful lurch. I wiped the dirt from my hands onto my jeans, took a steadying breath, and answered with a hopeful, "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice was an Arctic wind. Flat, emotionless, devoid of any warmth. "Mom, I'm calling to inform you that Liam and I were married yesterday." Inform you, not share with you. The world went silent. The buzzing of the bees, the chirping of the birds, it all faded away. The heavy-headed roses in front of me blurred into a smear of red. I sank onto the bench, the gardening shears slipping from my numb fingers and landing silently in the soft mulch. "Married," I whispered, the word feeling like a foreign object in my mouth. "Yesterday? But the fall wedding, the plans." "We opted for something more private and meaningful," she said, the words clearly not her own. They had the polished corporate feel of a press release. Liam felt a large wedding had become too commercial, too much about pleasing other people. We had an intimate ceremony with our closest friends and family. It was perfect. Closest friends and family. The phrase was a deliberate poison dart, and it found its mark. I, her mother, the woman who had brought her into this world, was not considered close enough. I struggled to breathe, to form a coherent response. "Congratulations, Amelia," I managed, the words tasting like ash. I am sure it was a beautiful day." "It was," she confirmed, then moved on, the transition so jarring, so brutally transactional it made me gasp. "Oh, and speaking of plans, we were wondering if you could overnight the keys to the lake cabin. We've decided to spend our honeymoon there. We're planning to drive up on Friday." There it was. The culmination of 2 years of meticulous planning on his part. He had her name, he had her money, and now he was coming for our home, our sanctuary. He wasn't just content to marry her. He wanted to conquer every piece of her life, to plant his flag on the ruins of our family. I found my voice, and it was a voice I didn't recognize. It was cold, clear, and utterly devoid of the pain that was screaming inside me. "So let me get this straight. You got married legally yesterday. You didn't invite me. And now you are calling to ask for the keys to my house." A sigh of pure, unadulterated annoyance came through the phone. And then the words that would ignite the firestorm. The words that would turn a heartbroken mother into a woman bent on righteous justice. "We already got married, Mom. We only invited people who really matter. We only invited people who support our relationship. Just send the lake cabin keys and stop being so dramatic." In that instant, something inside me snapped. The grief, the pleading, the desperation. It all burned away, leaving behind a core of glacial calm. I saw the path forward with blinding clarity. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, my voice now impossibly sweet. "I'll make sure you get them. Have a wonderful, wonderful honeymoon." I ended the call. I picked up my shears, and as I methodically pruned the thorns from a rose stem, I began to plan my wedding gift. For the rest of that Wednesday, I moved through my house like a ghost. The pain was a living entity, a ravenous creature chewing on my insides. But beneath it, a new unfamiliar sensation was taking root. Rage. Not a hot, messy anger but a cold, crystalline fury. Liam thought he had one. He had secured his prize, and now all that was left was to collect the spoils, starting with my family's cabin. He had cast me in the role of the hysterical, dramatic mother who would eventually cry herself out and accept her diminished place in her daughter's life. He had grossly, fatally underestimated me. My first call wasn't to a lawyer or a therapist. It was to my oldest friend, Margaret, whose late husband had been a homicide detective. I needed someone off the books, someone who knew how to navigate the dark, unlit alleys of people's lives. I need the best private investigator you know, I said, my voice devoid of its usual warmth. Someone thorough, discreet, and ruthless. Margaret didn't ask too many questions. She sensed the steel in my tone. I know a guy, she said. Frank Miller. Retired Philly PD. He's a bulldog. Expensive, but if there's dirt to be found, he'll find it. The next afternoon, I was sitting in Frank Miller's cramped, dusty office in a nondescript building downtown. The air smelled of stale coffee and old case files. Frank himself was a man who looked like he had been carved from granite, with weary eyes that missed nothing and a quiet intensity that was far more intimidating than any overt display of toughness. I laid it all out for him, my voice calm and clinical as I detailed the past 2 years. The perfect first meeting, the slow and steady isolation, the severing of her friendship with Sarah, the suspicious investment of $20,000, and the final brutal phone call. I gave him every scrap of information I had on Liam. I don't care if he's cheating on her, I concluded, looking him directly in the eye. That's the least of my worries. I want to know who he really is. I want to know where every single penny he has ever spent came from. I want his entire life, from the day he was born until this morning, mapped out on my table. I want to know what skeletons are in his closet. And I want their names. Frank listened without interruption, making small notes on a legal pad. When I was finished, he looked at me for a long moment. This will not be cheap, Mrs. Thompson. I have a retirement fund, I said simply. Consider it reinvested in my daughter's future. Find me the truth, Mr. Miller. The first few days of the investigation were deeply frustrating. Frank's initial sweeps came up with a portrait of a model citizen. Liam Webster had no criminal record, no bankruptcies, and a sterling credit score. His digital footprint was minimal. The guy is a ghost, Eleanor, Frank said over the phone. It's almost like his life was professionally scrubbed clean right around 5 years ago. That's not clean, Frank, I countered, my instincts screaming. That's a cover-up. Forget the public records. Follow the money. The $20,000 Amelia gave him. His rent on that expensive apartment. The car. The ring. It has to be coming from somewhere. That was the key that unlocked everything. Frank switched tactics, focusing all his resources on a deep dive into Liam's financials. It was a slow, painstaking process of peeling back layers of shell corporations and obscure accounts. And then, nearly 2 weeks after I first hired him, Frank called me. I've found the source, he said, his voice grim. The accounts he's drawing from are all linked to a single parent company, a holding company based in the Cayman Islands. Eleanor, are you familiar with a company called Pinnacle Holdings? The floor dropped out from under me. Pinnacle Holdings. The name was a curse, a ghost that had haunted my family for 20 years. It was the company run by the man who had destroyed my husband. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a haunting. And I was finally about to see the face of the ghost. Eleanor? Are you still there? Frank's voice crackled through the phone, pulling me back from the abyss of the past. Yes, Frank, I whispered, sinking into a kitchen chair. I know the name. Tell me everything. He did. And the story he unspooled was a multi-generational saga of greed and betrayal so diabolical it belonged in a crime novel. The man who had founded Pinnacle Holdings, the slick con artist who had partnered with my husband David all those years ago, was a man named Charles Webster. After he had systematically embezzled millions from their joint real estate venture, bankrupting David and crushing his spirit, He had vanished, the money laundered through a labyrinth of offshore accounts. The lawsuits went nowhere. The stress, I am certain to this day, is what put my hard-working, honorable husband in an early grave. And Charles Webster, the architect of my family's ruin, had a son. His son was Liam. I let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. It all clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening finality. Liam wasn't just some random predator who had stumbled upon my daughter. This was a legacy. The sins of the father were being visited upon the child. Frank continued, his voice low and steady. Charles Webster had passed away 3 years ago. His will left his son Liam as the sole beneficiary and controller of the entire Pinnacle Holdings portfolio. The portfolio built with my husband's stolen money. Liam had been living a life of luxury, funding his entire predatory existence, with the very fortune that had cost my family everything. But the final twisted piece of the puzzle was the most depraved of all. Frank had hired a forensic accountant to look at the legal standing of those funds. Here's the kicker, Eleanor, Frank said. Because the original fraud case was never fully settled after your husband's death, the money in those accounts is still legally considered stolen property. And according to probate law, the primary heir to David Thompson's estate, and therefore the rightful claimant to those stolen assets, is his only living child. Amelia. Liam knew. The emails Amelia would later find proved it. He knew for years that the millions he was sitting on were legally vulnerable, that they could be claimed by the daughter of the man his father had destroyed. His entire courtship of my daughter was a cold, calculated business strategy. He wasn't looking for a wife. He was executing a hostile takeover of his own stolen inheritance. Marrying Amelia was his way to secure the fortune, to merge his finances with the one person who could legally take it from him, ensuring that what was hers would become his. I felt a profound, chilling sense of violation. My daughter's heart, her trust, her very life, had been nothing more than collateral in a long con to launder his family's dirty money. Thank you so much for sticking with me on this journey. It's a lot to take in, I know. If you're still here, still listening to my story, could you do me a favor and just comment with the number 1 below? It would mean the world to me to know you're still with me as we get to the part where I decided to stop being a victim and start fighting back. Because as I hung up the phone with Frank, the grief that had been strangling me for 2 years finally gave way. It was replaced by something new. Something cold, hard, and sharp as a shard of glass. He had orchestrated a multi-year plan. Well, I was about to orchestrate his downfall in a single weekend. It was time to go shopping for a wedding gift. The next 3 days were a blur of focused activity. My grief and helplessness were burned away by the clean, white-hot fire of purpose. My quiet suburban home transformed into a command center for operation. Wedding gift. Frank overnight a thick, heavy package containing the fruits of his labor. I cleared my dining room table and laid out each document like a weapon being prepped for battle. It was an arsenal of truth. The first stack was the court filings from 20 years ago, dry and legalistic, but they told a clear story of my husband David's trust and Charles Webster's calculated betrayal. I ran my fingers over David's signature on the original partnership agreement, a fresh pang of sorrow mixing with my rage. The second stack was the financial roadmap Frank's accountant had created, a dizzying series of charts and statements that tracked the stolen millions from their origin point, through the murky channels of Pinnacle Holdings, and directly into the various personal accounts from which Liam paid for his fancy dinners, his designer clothes, and the gaudy diamond ring on my daughter's finger. It was the paper trail of his entire fraudulent life. The third and perhaps most damning stack contained the signed, notarized affidavits from the 2 other women Liam had targeted. Their stories mirrored Amelia's with chilling precision. A whirlwind romance, promises of a brilliant future, a sudden and urgent need for an investment, and the slow creeping isolation from their families. One woman had lost $50,000, the other nearly $100,000. They were eager to help, to ensure he couldn't do this to anyone else. Their words would give my gift a chorus of voices, proving Amelia wasn't an isolated case. She was just the latest victim in a pattern of predation. I bundled it all together. The history of the theft, the proof of his spending, and the testimony of his past victims. I added the business card of Ms. Albright, the shark of a financial fraud attorney my own lawyer had recommended. This wasn't just information. It was a turnkey solution for his own destruction. I placed everything inside a handsome dark brown leather portfolio. It felt substantial in my hands, heavy with the weight of his sins. Then I drove to the fanciest stationery store in town. I chose the thickest, most luxurious silver wrapping paper they had, the kind that crinkles with a satisfying sound. I bought a spool of wide white silk ribbon and a matching pre-made bow the size of a dinner plate. Back home, I wrapped the box with the care and precision of a surgeon. Each fold was crisp, each corner perfectly tucked. I tied the silk ribbon around it and affixed the magnificent bow to the top. From the outside it looked like a gift from Tiffany's, an object of celebration and joy. It was a beautiful lie, a perfect Trojan horse. At the very bottom of the box, beneath the portfolio that held his ruin, I placed the keys to the Poconos Lake cabin. They were on a simple worn brass ring, the same one they'd been on since my own father had first opened the cabin doors 50 years ago. On Friday morning I drove to their apartment. The city air was thick and humid. I walked to their door, my heart a steady cold drum. I placed the beautifully wrapped box on their doormat, then tucked a small cream-colored card into the loops of the silk bow. In my neatest cursive I wrote, "Congratulations on your marriage. A successful partnership is built on knowing everything about each other's families. With love, Mom." I walked away without a second glance. The fuse was lit. The waiting was the hardest part. I went home and tried to busy myself. I puttered in the garden, I organized my spice rack. I attempted to read a book. But it was all a charade. My entire being was coiled like a spring, every nerve ending tingling with anticipation, listening for the sound of the phone ringing. It was the grim anticipation of a demolition expert who has planted the charges, flipped the switch, and is now waiting for the inevitable thunderous collapse. The call came at 2:17 p.m. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, and Amelia's face, smiling from a picture taken in happier times, lit up the screen. I let it ring twice, a small petty act of control. Then I took a deep, calming breath and answered. The sound that erupted from my phone was not a human voice. It was a raw, guttural roar of pure animalistic rage. It was Liam. "You crazy old witch. What the hell did you do?" he screamed, his voice distorting through the small speaker. "This is a sick joke. How dare you send us this? This filth. This is harassment. I swear to God I am calling the police right now." I picked up my lukewarm cup of chamomile tea, took a small sip and savored the moment. "Hello, Liam," I said, my voice impossibly, infuriatingly calm. "I take it you've had a chance to open your wedding gift. Funny? You think this is funny?" he shrieked, his voice escalating in pitch. "You're trying to destroy my marriage before it even starts. You're a vengeful, jealous old hag." "My goodness, such language," I murmured. "I'm a bit confused, though. What exactly would your police report say?" My new mother-in-law gave me a thoughtful, leather-bound collection of public records and newspaper clippings pertaining to my family's financial history. "I don't believe that's a crime, dear." In the background, a new sound emerged, the heartbreaking sound of Amelia sobbing great, ragged gasps for air. "Liam, stop it. Just let me talk to her," she pleaded. "And oh," he bellowed, clearly not to me but to her. "Can't you see what she's doing? This woman is insane. She's making it all up to drive us apart." "Am I, Liam?" I asked, my voice dropping into a soft, dangerous whisper. "Did I make up your father, Charles Webster? Did I make up Pinnacle Holdings? Did I invent the court documents detailing the theft of $2 million from my husband, Amelia's father?" The screaming stopped dead. The silence on the other end of the line was thick and heavy, charged with the dawning horror of discovery. When he finally spoke, the blustering rage was gone, replaced by the thin, reedy whine of a cornered animal. You're lying." "Oh, I never lie about facts, Liam," I said, allowing a note of sweet reason into my tone. "I was a nurse for 35 years. Precision is everything. But you don't have to take my word for it. It's all in there. As is the business card for a Ms. Albright, a very sharp attorney who is incredibly interested in discussing the legal status of those offshore accounts. Apparently, since Amelia is David's sole legal heir, she has a rather compelling claim to that money. All of it. With 20 years of compound interest, the forensic accountant estimates the total is somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million. I heard a sharp, strangled gasp which I knew was Amelia's. It was followed by a loud crashing sound, as if he had hurled the phone against a wall. I could hear their muffled voices, her crying, him cursing. I spoke clearly into what I assumed was now a speakerphone. "Oh, and Liam? The keys to our lake cabin are at the bottom of the box. Consider them my gift to you both. I'm sure you'll find the fresh mountain air very conducive to discussing your shared financial future." Then, with a click that felt as final and satisfying as a gavel coming down, I ended the call. The building had been brought down. Now it was time to survey the wreckage. I gave her space. I knew the truth I had unleashed was a brutal, corrosive agent. It would take time for it to burn through 2 years of lies and manipulation. I spent the next 2 days in a strange state of limbo, half expecting an angry phone call, half expecting a squad car to show up at my door on some trumped-up harassment charge. But there was only silence. On Sunday morning, as I was watering my porch ferns, I saw her. She was just sitting on the bottom step of my front porch, huddled into herself like a lost child. She was still wearing the jeans and sweatshirt from Friday. Her hair was unwashed, her face was pale and blotchy, and dark, bruised-looking circles ringed her eyes. She looked like she had been hollowed out from the inside. She didn't even say hello. As I opened the door, she looked up, her eyes a well of exhausted pain, and said, "Mom, tell me everything. The real story from the beginning." I didn't say a single "I told you so." There would be time for that later, or maybe never. Right now, my daughter was wounded, and my only job was to be a healer. I wrapped my arms around her, and she felt impossibly fragile. She sagged against me, and for the first time in 2 years she let me hold her. I led her inside to the kitchen table, the epicenter of our family life, and made a pot of coffee, strong and black. As it brewed, she began to talk, her voice a low, raspy monotone. "He's gone," she said, not looking at me, just staring at the wood grain of the table. "He left yesterday morning. He spent all of Friday night screaming, first at the phone, then at me. He said it was all lies, that you were a master manipulator, that you had faked the documents. Then he switched tactics. He said even if it was true, it was in the past, that it had nothing to do with us, that you were trying to poison our marriage out of jealousy." She took a shaky breath. "He gave me an ultimatum. He packed 2 suitcases and said he was going to a hotel to give me time to come to my senses. He said if I chose to believe my toxic, vengeful mother over my own husband, then our marriage was a sham and he wanted no part of it. The classic abuser's gambit. Flip the script and make the victim the villain. But after he left," she continued, looking up at me for the first time, "I did something. He was always so arrogant, so sure of himself. He never even put a password on his laptop." She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a thick manila folder, pushing it across the table toward me. It was filled with printed-out emails. I read through them, my blood turning to ice. They were between Liam and a man named Marcus Webb, an offshore wealth consultant. They went back 3 years. They discussed, in chillingly casual terms, the Thompson inheritance, the legal exposure, and the most efficient path to asset legitimization. And then I saw the document that made me want to be physically sick. It was a file he had compiled on my daughter. It had her photo, her work history, her estimated salary, and a section titled, Psychological Profile. It listed her vulnerabilities: lingering grief over father's death, emotionally dependent on widowed mother, history of unsuccessful relationships leading to a desire for stability. "He didn't fall in love with me, Mom," she whispered, a tear tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. "He profiled me. That accidental meeting at the coffee shop where he spilled a latte on me? One of these emails details him tracking my routine for 2 weeks to stage it. My life with him wasn't a romance. It was an intelligence operation." She told me she had called Sarah, who had listened and cried with her and told her to go to me. She had even called one of the other women from the affidavit, who confirmed every detail of his predatory playbook. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. "I am so sorry." She shook her head, and a spark of the old Amelia, the strong Amelia, ignited in her tired eyes. "Don't be sorry, Mom. Be ready. He didn't just break my heart. He declared war on our family. And now he's going to find out what happens when a Thompson fights back." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of activity that felt like something out of a movie. On Monday morning, Amelia and I, armed with her folder of emails and my portfolio from Frank, walked into the sleek downtown offices of Ms. Albright, the attorney. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, a sharper suit, and an aura of controlled ferocity. She read through the documents in silence, her expression growing grimmer with each page. When she finished, she looked up at us and a slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "Well," she said, steepling her fingers, "Mr. Liam Webster is in a world of trouble. This isn't just a messy divorce. The premeditation in these emails, this is a federal case. This is racketeering. This is the stuff that gets you a very long stay in a place with very high walls." She picked up her phone. "I need to make a call," she said. "I have some old friends at the FBI who are going to be very interested in this." An hour later, we were retelling our story to 2 FBI agents in a sterile, windowless conference room. Agent Jensen was the lead, a calm, methodical man, while his partner, Agent Riley, had a fiery intensity that I found deeply reassuring. It turned out that Liam Webster was already on their radar. They had an open investigation on him based on a complaint from the family of his second victim, but they had been struggling to prove criminal intent beyond a reasonable doubt. "He was always smart enough to frame it as a soured romance or a business deal gone bad," Agent Jensen explained. "He walked a fine line. But these emails..." He tapped the folder Amelia had brought. "This is him in his own words admitting to a multi-year conspiracy to commit fraud. This is the ball game." Agent Riley leaned forward. "This evidence is enough to indict him. But men like this have ways of hiding assets, of delaying trials for years. What would make this case airtight, and what would help us ensure he gets the maximum possible sentence, is a recorded confession." My eyes darted to Amelia. She sat up straighter, her jaw set. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice clear and strong. And so the plan was hatched. It was a terrifying, audacious gambit. Amelia was to be the bait. That evening, sitting at my kitchen table with the agents on speakerphone, Amelia composed the text message. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her resolve was absolute. "Liam, you were right. I'm so sorry. My mom has been trying to control my life for years. I see that now. I choose you. I'll do whatever it takes to prove it. Please come home so we can fix this." We waited. Each second felt like an hour. Then her phone buzzed. His reply came through, oozing with condescending triumph. "I knew you'd see the truth, baby. My poor confused girl. Don't worry, I'll protect you from her. I'm on my way back. We'll start fresh, just you and me. I'll be home Friday evening." He had taken the bait. The next few days were surreal. Agents came to Amelia's apartment, a place now tainted by his memory, and transformed it into a stage. Tiny cameras were hidden in smoke detectors and bookshelves. Microphones were placed in lamps. They walked Amelia through the plan, over and over. They gave her a delicate silver necklace to wear. Hidden inside the pendant was a high-fidelity recording device. As Friday evening descended, a knot of fear and anticipation tightened in my stomach. My daughter, who had just escaped the clutches of a predator, was about to willingly walk back into his den. She was facing her monster, not with tears but with a wire. And all I could do was wait, and pray the trap would hold. I spent Friday evening in a self-imposed prison in my own living room. The television was off. The house was silent except for the frantic thumping of my own heart. My phone lay on the coffee table, a black silent rectangle that held the fate of the entire operation. Agent Jensen had promised to call me the second they had him. The waiting was a unique form of torture. At 7:45 p.m., my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. It was the coded signal from Agent Riley. Showtime. I later learned from both Amelia and the agents exactly how the scene played out. Liam arrived, not with a hint of suspicion, but with an air of magnanimous victory. He carried a bouquet of blood-red roses and a bottle of vintage champagne, the perfect props for his role as the wronged but forgiving husband. Amelia, channeling an inner actress I never knew she possessed, ran to him, burying her face in his chest in a convincing display of tearful relief. She apologized profusely, repeating the lines they had rehearsed, about how she had been confused and manipulated by me, her toxic mother. He lapped it up, stroking her hair and murmuring condescending comforts. "Sure, baby, it's okay," he said. his voice captured in crystal-clear audio by the necklace. "I'm here now. I'll protect you from her. We'll get a restraining order if we have to." They sat on the couch, the hidden cameras capturing every nuance of his smug expression. He poured the champagne, and then he began to talk about their glorious future. A future built on their money. This was the moment. "I want that future, Liam," Amelia said, her voice a perfect blend of vulnerability and resolve. "I do. But after everything my mom threw at me, I need to understand it. For my own peace of mind. The money, the inheritance. If we're going to be a real team, a real partnership, you have to tell me the truth. All of it." His ego, puffed up by his apparent victory, could not resist the urge to gloat, to reveal the genius of his master plan to his adoring, submissive wife. "Baby, it's simple," he said with a condescending chuckle. "My father was a shark. Your father was a guppy. The shark ate the guppy. It's the law of the jungle. My father simply took what he was smart enough to get, and he passed that legacy on to me. The only legal loose end was that your father's estate technically still had a claim. A very, very long shot, but still a loose end." "So you knew," she whispered. "Before you even met me, you knew who I was?" He smiled a wide, predatory smile. "Amelia, darling, I'm a strategist. I don't believe in accidents. I saw a multi-million-dollar problem, and I saw a beautiful, elegant solution. You were the solution. Marrying you wasn't just about love. It was about finally securing my birthright. It was the most brilliant move in a chess game my father started 20 years ago. With you as my queen, I finally checkmate the whole damn world." He leaned in to kiss her, a victor claiming his prize. "It was the most enjoyable business deal I've ever closed," he whispered. Amelia didn't kiss him back. She pulled away just an inch, and the look in her eyes was no longer one of adoration. It was one of pure, unadulterated contempt. "And you," she said, her voice ringing out, clear and cold as a funeral bell, "are the one who's caught, you son of a bitch." The words had barely left her lips when the apartment door, which the agents had unlocked remotely, burst open. "FBI. Hands where I can see them." The transformation on Liam's face was spectacular. The smug, arrogant mask melted away in an instant, replaced by a slack-jawed, bug-eyed expression of pure, terrified disbelief. As Agent Jensen and his team swarmed him, pushing him to the floor and cuffing his hands behind his back, he finally seemed to understand. He had been played. The guppy's daughter had grown teeth, and she had just bitten back. Hard. The wheels of justice, once they started turning, moved with surprising speed. Liam's arrogance, so effective in a living room, crumbled under the harsh lights of a federal interrogation room. Faced with the mountain of evidence, the financial trail, the testimonies of his other victims, and his own voice on tape boasting about his criminal enterprise, he had no choice but to cooperate in hopes of a lighter sentence. The trial, when it happened 6 months later, was less of a legal battle and more of a formal confirmation of his guilt. The courtroom was packed. I sat in the front row, with a newly reconciled Sarah on one side of me and Amelia on the other. Across the aisle sat the 2 other women he had victimized, who had flown in to witness his downfall. We were a quiet, somber sisterhood, bound by the shared trauma of his predation. The most powerful moments of the trial came not from the lawyers, but from the victim impact statements. One by one, the women he had targeted stood up and spoke their truth. They spoke of the stolen money, yes, but more importantly, they spoke of the stolen time, the stolen trust, and the deep emotional scars he had left behind. When it was Amelia's turn, she walked to the podium with a quiet dignity that filled me with an almost unbearable pride. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked directly at Liam, who sat slumped and gray-faced at the defendant's table, unable to meet her gaze. "Mr. Webster didn't just defraud me of my inheritance," she began, her voice clear and steady. "He executed a calculated, systematic campaign to defraud me of my life. He sought to sever my every connection, to isolate me from my mother, my friends, and my own instincts, until he was the only voice I could hear. He saw my kindness as a weakness to be exploited and my love as a tool to be used. He believed that strong, successful women were nothing more than high-value targets. But he made one critical miscalculation. He failed to understand that the same strength that made us his targets is the same strength that allows us to stand here today, united, and see him brought to justice." The judge sentenced Liam to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. The courtroom was silent as he was led away in handcuffs, a diminished, pathetic figure, the architect of his own spectacular ruin. A few weeks later, Amelia and I took a trip. We drove up to the Poconos, to the little A-frame cabin that had been the start and the center of so much pain. It was a crisp autumn day, and the leaves surrounding the lake were a breathtaking tapestry of red, orange, and gold. We didn't talk much at first. We just sat on the porch swing sipping hot tea, letting the peaceful silence of the place work its healing magic. After a while, Amelia leaned her head on my shoulder. "You know," she said softly, "for a while I thought he had ruined this place for me forever. I thought I would never be able to come here without thinking of him. And now?" I asked. She looked out over the sparkling water. "Now I realize this place has nothing to do with him. It has to do with us. It's about Grandpa teaching me to fish on that dock. It's about Dad teaching me how to skip stones. It's about you and me drinking hot chocolate by the fire. He was just a trespasser. And now he's gone." She turned to me, and her smile was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was a smile of pure, unburdened freedom. "When I'm ready," she said. "And when I find someone who is kind and decent, someone who is actually worthy of being in our family, can we have that wedding I always dreamed of? Right here, barefoot with fairy lights everywhere." Tears streamed down my face, but for the first time in years, they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. "I would love that more than anything in the world," I said, hugging her tight. Liam had tried to tear our world apart, but he had failed. He had tested our bond, stretched it to its breaking point, but in the end it had held. We had found our way back to each other, stronger and wiser, with a renewed appreciation for the fierce, unyielding power of a mother's love. Thank you for being here with me and for listening to my story. I wanted to share it as a warning, but also as a message of hope. Always, always trust your instincts. Hold the people you love close and never let anyone, no matter how charming, convince you that those bonds are a weakness. If you've ever had an experience that made you feel isolated or question your own reality, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story matters, and I promise you, you are not alone.